Hi everyone. So today we're going to be talking about your pelvis. Like every day I'm sending you a few information and then eventually I'm going to try to bring everything together. But today the topic of the conversation is pelvis, and I would like you to think of your pelvis in two different ways: pelvis and hip flexors, right? So when we talk about the stability, we talk about the pelvis, the bone of the pelvis, right? And we're telling you usually that everything, all the stacks have to be aligned. So when we're referring to that, we want you to think of pelvis moving from foot to foot, right? And you can see we are creating a nice alignment between the pelvis, which is a big bone, your rib cage on top of it, and then the head. And of course, and oftentimes we say we add the foot. So it's a foot, pelvis, rib cage, head, right? And we're moving all of it together. So the way I would like you to think of your pelvis like a big ball, right? That it can tilt. And I will show you to you from the side. You can tilt it back, you can tilt it forward, or you can have it in neutral. The way we're gonna keep it neutral, you're just gonna lift the front part of your pelvis up. Not forward, do not mistake that I'm asking for the forward action, right? I literally just want you to lift. So you're lifting the front of the pelvis and you're dropping the back, right? So immediately you should feel almost like a little corset feeling, or for my guys, like you're tightening the belt, right? The feeling it's a little bit tighter. Oftentimes, my clients will make a comment, so you want me to squeeze your butt. I do not want you to squeeze the butt. It's a completely different feeling when you are relaxing. You squeeze the butt, the feeling it's stuck, like it's really difficult to make a movement. I'm just asking you to arrange the pelvis, the bone of the pelvis, in a very different way in relationship to your thighs. So now when I'm moving from foot to foot, from side to side, could you see how like everything is nice and collected? And it's almost impossible when you change the position of your pelvis in relationship to the legs that your upper body can be misaligned. Once you collect your pelvis, the ribcage usually have a feeling like it fits right in. So the example for those of you that work with me already, I give you, it's almost like having a coffee cup, right? This is your cup. Your ribcage is just a lid holding the energy, right? So since today we're talking only about your pelvis, I want you to think that when you're moving, going forward, going back, be very much aware of moving your pelvis with you in that alignment instead of having your pelvis here. Could you see how now I'm hanging out? The butt is out and the chest is out. The minute I lift the front part of my pelvis, all of a sudden everything gets a little bit more centered. So when we talk about your stability, we're going to refer to your hips as pelvis. When we talk about hip movement, hip activity, we're going to talk about the hip flexors, right? It's a joint, then the bone of your leg goes into the pelvis, right? It's very much like this. And we're going to be concentrating on the small part of the body, which are your hip flexors. That's when your whole Cuban action, your Latin, your rhythm action gonna come in, your hip action, right? So could you see, I'm thinking of the hip flexors versus when I move from side to side, I'm moving my whole pelvis as a one big bone, right? Unfortunately, lots of time when you guys are thinking of your hips, you only think of your hip flexors or only think of the pelvis. So how many times you try to do a figure eight, let's say, and your pelvis was going? Could you see that's too big of a movement? Now you're moving the bone. Instead of in your figure eight, you should be thinking more of the hip flexors versus moving the pelvis. Could you see when I move the pelvis from side to side, the movement becomes very swaying and swinging. In rhythm and Latin, very rarely that we use that. And if we do, we tell you we would like you to be in that particular fancy position. 9 out of 10 times when you're actually creating any body action, we very much just want you to pay attention to moving your hip flexors. Now, it seems so complicated and it seems so smart. It's very simple. You're just gonna bend one leg at a time. When you bend one leg at a time, all the joints are responding. By bending your knee, your ankle joint and your hip joint will respond to you, right? Could you see it just goes up and down? You don't have to think too much about it. When you're waiting, you know, right now during these crazy times, you are waiting in line to get to the store, right? To do anything, you bend one knee. I can't believe this is happening. This is exactly the hip action that we're looking for. And could you see it's very internal? So don't think it has to be big. The movement is internal, where the hip action comes from. But yes, your whole body gonna respond. And then of course, you know, we're gonna have another video how we're gonna connect your whole integration of your upper body, of your hips, of your legs all together. Right now, I just want you to think bending and straightening your knee. And for those of you, let's say that do rhythm, could you see it happens on every single step along the way, right? Sideways, you can see straightening and bending and straightening and bending, and you're allowing your hips to respond to it very organically, very naturally, without forcing the issue, right? First, try very small, be present to what's happening, where, I always like to say, where does the movement come from? Note how does it look to the outside, right? Because lots of time we try to copy already done product. Yes, you want to see the product, but then you also need to be very clear and understanding where does it come from. Yes, so let's say if we do a little rumba backs, right? You're going to start from bending of the knee, keeping it bent, and then you're going to straighten. And could you see now it's nice and aligned? You're going to bend one knee, and again you have a nice hip action. You're going to straight, you're going to bend, you're going to straight, you're going to bend, you're going to straight, you're going to bend, you're going to straight, bend, straight, bend, straight, bend, right? Could you see? Very simple, very within, allowing the body to respond to bending your joints. So we're becoming more flexible through bending your joints, not through trying to make big elaborate movement. We're just going to enhance that movement later on in an appropriate and correct way and sequencing, but we're not changing how does the body operate. We're trying to keep it within the organic movement. I call this the intelligence of the body, not just intelligence of the brain. The brain tells the body what to do, but then the body have its natural way of doing it. As a dancer, we're not changing how does your body work. We're just making it a little bit more elaborate. We're making it a little bit more thought of, so therefore it becomes a product. Therefore it becomes impressive every step along the way, but versus just pedestrian moving out in the world, being worried from getting from A to B. Right now in the dancing, going from A to B, we want each step to look very nice and to have a control over each step. So if I do this sideways for you, you bend, you make a step back, you bend, you make a step side, you bend, together, bend, forward, bend, side, bend, together, bend, step back, and then the bend, right? So a quick question, when does the bending happen? The bending happened on the end. So if you count and 1, and 2, and 1, and 2. For your cha-cha, and 2, and 3, and cha-cha-cha, and 2, and 3, and cha-cha-cha, right? Could you see there is an action of your hip in relationship to your knees, right? Even for those of you that dance international style, the same principle applies. You're on the foot, on the straight leg when you're striking the step, and then when you're bending the leg behind, getting ready for the next step, that's when your hip responds, and then you're going back, and that's when your hip gonna respond, right? Could you see you can have a little bit of a rotation, and then as the leg comes in, your movement gonna get significantly bigger within your pelvis, still making sure that your pelvis bone is picked up, right? That you are not sticking the butt out. That's the most misunderstood conception. Back, it's just lifted, pelvis is lifted, and we're just activating the hip flexors. So could you see, I do not mess my alignment. My alignment, I'm still nice and vertical, stacked up on the blocks, and we know this for all of your dances, right? So you have a nice presentation and nice present on the dance floor, and you have a nice organic activity of your body versus pushing the movement in some, what I call this, a funky direction. So hopefully all of this will help you. If you have any questions, just write it in your comments or you contact me, and I'll be more than happy to respond to any concerns that you might have. Have a great day. Bye.